we started to see that below the bonnet, there were elements of people, performance, and psychology that maybe we didn't understand as much as we thought we did.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today we are going to talk about, as I'm sure you're surprised, we are going to talk about leadership. And I'm excited to talk with my guest today and understand a little bit about her perspective and how she looks at it and how she looks to help entrepreneurs and leaders and CEOs and all the like that are leading people, ultimately leading an organization. It is probably... I can give you all the operational expertise in the world, but when it comes to leadership, it's my belief that there's a lot of feel involved, and you've got to understand yourself before you can understand how to lead others. And so without further ado, would like to welcome Miss Tracy Clark to the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Tracy.
Thank you so much, Chad. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, excited to have you. I think... First, it may be good just to give, I've got your background here, but you can probably tell it a little bit better than I can. So why don't you go ahead and give the listeners a little bit of your background, and that'll give us kind of a frame of reference for kind of our chat today.
Sounds good. So my brother and I had our own business. It was in international oil and gas events. So we worked all around the world. And we worked with presidents, ministers, heads of oil companies, national oil companies. And we won 2 Queen's Awards for international trade. We grew the company by 450% in profit over a period of 4 years. And then we sold it for an eight-figure sum. And I'm making it all sound very, very easy. But of course, it wasn't.
Yeah, it just happened overnight. It was great.
But of course, there were challenges. You know, we were linked to the oil and gas industry, so we had oil and gas crashes. We went through recessions and all sorts of uncertainties that I'm sure you guys experience in your business too. And so, what we realized was that when we were coming up to our exit, that we needed some support because we needed to make sure we were really going to maximize the sale. So we got in a consultant who really opened our eyes to areas that we thought we might be good at, but maybe we weren't quite as good as we thought we were. So we were good on the product and the strategy. But Chad, you mentioned in your intro that it's all around leadership and leading yourself. And that was a real eye-opener because we started to see that below the bonnet, there were elements of people, performance, and psychology that maybe we didn't understand as much as we thought we did. So what happened was it led me on to a journey of discovery, and I became a coach, but were really fascinated into how do I unlock potential, not only in myself, but also in my team. And so that's what I now do. I now help other business owners who maybe have the same blind spots that we had, to really be able to upgrade their leadership and really unlock the potential of their team so that they're not leaving any potential on the table.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that. One question that comes to mind, it's kind of the tail end of what you're saying there. What do you typically find? I mean, I feel like I feel like entrepreneurs have to learn how to be leaders, like visionary, and we got the ideas and we got all of this stuff. And then it's like, well, doesn't everybody see it the way we see it? Like, this is going to be fascinating. Like, it's going to be awesome. Like, join the thing. Like, what do you typically see when you work with people that are very entrepreneurial that need, like, where are they lacking on like the leadership front?
Yeah, so true. They're very, very, very visionary and often experts in their area. So they presume everyone's going to just join them on the ride. But they don't understand their learning and their growth is in how to lead themselves so that they show up in the best possible way, but then also how to unlock that potential in their team. And so it's very much not a question of doing more. It's a question of leading what I say is from a really playful mindset, one that's infused with deep levels of curiosity, radical open mindedness, and proactive experimentation, so that you get the teams feeling included. And so that they don't just feel like it's you up front and they're following you. You want everyone to be taking part, to be engaged, to be aligned, and really feel part of this business. And that's how you're going to get the engine of the business really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's something that I learned early on was, I had this grand vision of where we wanted to take things and how awesome it was going to be when we get there. But then what I forgot to do, and I think entrepreneurs oftentimes suffer from this, is we have this great idea in our head and we fail to share it with the team. We fail to communicate that down. What are some strategies for, if I'm a leader, I'm sitting there and I know this goes through a lot of people's heads is, why doesn't everybody else understand, or why aren't they getting on board? Like, how do you coach entrepreneurs, leaders to kind of communicate that vision appropriately to their team to get them on board?
In several ways, it depends really on the leader, but often they are not very clear on exactly why they're doing it, what the reason is, what the values are they're trying to embody. So I always start with clarity on what is it you're trying to achieve and what is the impact? What is the why behind your vision? Because you mentioned earlier, it's about feeling. We want people to feel emotionally involved, like, wow, is that where you're going? Boy, that's where I want to join you. I want to join you because I know that I can make a difference in that area. So, really bringing in the emotion and getting people to understand what impact they can have in supporting you to build this company and why are we doing it. That's one of the major ways I will go around getting leaders to really get their team on board. And then, Chad, what we
Yeah.
want is not only do we want that clarity, we want to make sure that there's alignment. Do the team believe in where they're going and what they stand for? That is crucial, because when you get the alignment, then you can give them more autonomy because you as the leader know that they're going in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I know that I've struggled with over the years is like I really fell in love with this concept of empowerment. And it's like let people do and all of this. And I think the one thing that I did not account for and am learning on the fly at this point in time is the ability to show people how they're winning. Like you let them do something, but they don't know if they're heading in the right direction. They may be taking a misstep here or there. Like in your view, how important are, KPIs is the buzzword or scoreboards? One of the things that I've learned too is like people, mostly individual contributors on their team, their scoreboard is different than the company scoreboard. You may be trying to hit revenue targets and gross margins and different stuff like that. How do you kind of navigate that people on your team may have a different scoreboard for what winning to them is, as opposed to kind of what the company's overall goal? Yes, they're going to be a part of it, but you've got to show them on a more granular level on how they win. How do you kind of navigate that?
I think it's absolutely crucial that they understand, and maybe you've just said this, but they need to understand how their KPIs and their indicators, how do they link? Because they need to see that they're a part of the whole, and they need to understand the ripple effect that what they do has on all of the other teams. So I would start off again with clarity. Clarity to me is always a real starting point.
The clarity on what the mission is, and then I think what you said earlier is extremely important too, is understanding the why. Like, we sell furnaces and air conditioners. Well, that's not like the coolest, sexiest, like why that, like, let's sell more of them. Well, like why? And so we've worked really hard to, hey, we do that, but we do that as a means to hopefully affect the lives of the people that we serve in the communities that we operate. And, if we can do that in a positive manner, the results will take care of itself. And so making sure that that why is front and center, I think is paramount for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And Chad, you mentioned the word empowerment. One of the areas I see leaders go wrong is even if the person knows what they're doing, what the goal is and why they're going to do it. The question is, do they know how to do it? Are they clear? Do you as the leader know what their level of skill is and their level of confidence? Because often I see on founders just assume that these people will know, their team will know how to deliver those results. And so often they just need a little bit more guidance. They need a bit of support in order to really gain that confidence and the ability to be autonomous, which then leads to you as the leader being able to empower your team more.
I appreciate you saying that because that leads right to my next question because we've made missteps in this area a number of times. And I think it's when you see someone who has some potential, maybe they're the leader of the pack or, whatever it may be. And it's like, oh, it's time to find someone who can kind of lead that department, that, particular, whatever it is within the business. And then we do a terrible job of setting them up for success. It's kind of like, hey, thanks for applying. You're now going to be the manager of XYZ. Go to it. Here's your budget number. Let her rip. And oftentimes it is a disaster, not because of them, but more so of the support that we gave them. What's your advice on like when we recognize people within the organization that could take on a larger role? What are the steps or what are the things that people should be thinking about as we prepare them to kind of take on this next role?
I think it's very crucial to understand what is different between their current role and this new role. So what areas of responsibility will they have that they didn't have before? What are the skills that they might not have been using in the last role? And especially if it's on the people side, how impactful are they as a leader? Because often when they are promoted, their level of responsibility goes up. Suddenly they have a team around them and they just feel a huge weight on their shoulders. So I'm going to say, know where the gaps are and talk to them. Which areas do you feel confident in? Which areas do you feel you might need some support in? And I believe that communication is absolutely crucial. Because when people feel supported and they feel that you're happy for them to go to you, they're going to step up with questions. And that communication is going to ensure that mistakes aren't happening.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. I mean, we see it and you mentioned it earlier, they know what to do. They don't know yet how to do it. It's like drive revenue. Okay, do I just, in our world, do I just run more calls? Do I, what do I do? And it's like, no, here's the strategy. And so what we found effective is literally like sitting down with them and like mapping out their day. Like, where are you spending your time? I do this and this and this because I have to. I'll do a little bit of that because maybe it'll make an impact, and really mapping out, here's what you should be doing. This is the how. Here's where you need to be spending your time in order to get this result. And it's focusing less on the result, more on like the process of how to get there, and hopefully training them on that.
Yes, and I think it's training them not only on what they do, but it's training them on how they need to think in the role. So,
Yep.
so part of it is really looking at. I see that there are two angles. One is telling people, which in certain areas is very useful. But I think one of the angles that leaders underestimate and don't use enough is the power of questions. So as someone's going into a role, ask them lots of questions. How would you go about it? What do you see the challenges? Okay, if these are the challenges, what are the options you see? And help them to develop their thinking so that when you're not in the room, they can come back and go, hey, Chad's not here, but actually these were the questions we ask. And so that they start to, increase their ability to solve problems. That's a huge
Yeah,
part.
no, that makes a lot of sense. But I think it also leads back to what you said at the beginning, and we were both kind of talking about is, you've got to get really good at leading yourself before you can lead others. And I think if there's one sickness that all entrepreneurs have, it's that asking questions like, what do you mean? That seems wildly inefficient. Like, can we just do the thing? And I guess what advice do you give to leaders who maybe struggle? I ask this selfishly, who maybe struggle to ask those curious questions, to take the time to develop somebody. Someone's not going to become a rock star leader overnight. It's going to take time and patience and different stuff like that. What advice would you give for a leader being more curious, for asking better questions to kind of elicit those kind of light bulb moments for those people that you lead?
Yeah, I think it's around, and this was our growth, and my growth was understanding people in psychology and understanding that when people are asked and they come up with the answer and they own it, they're far more likely to execute on that. Now there's this wonderful study, this lady called Liz Wiseman. I don't know whether you've heard about her.
Yes.
Well, she's done the whole work on multipliers, and what she sees is that the multiplier, this is a bit of a sweeping generalization, tends to be the type of leader that really asks a lot of questions. They are extracting and expanding the potential of their team, but they're doing that through curiosity and through open-mindedness and through encouraging experimentation. And her studies show that leaders who lent to this side, who really lent into asking questions and bringing out the best in their team, they would extract between 80 to 120% of the potential of their team. Whereas the diminisher on the other side, the one who is a little bit of the know-it-all, the one who's going to talk and give the answers, as I say, this diminisher only extracts between 30 to 60% of the potential of their team. So think, Chad, of the ROI, the cost that you're having. If let's say you're paying someone 100 and you are only getting out 30,000 worth of potential, that's a huge waste. Whereas if you're veering towards asking questions and getting them to feel like a genius, getting them to feel empowered and like, I've got this, you're going to get 120% worth of that salary. So commercially, it makes sense. Curiosity leads to high commercial returns. That's what I'd say to the leader.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think about as a leader is, kind of driving the culture within the organization. And I know that, culture is such a, pie in the sky type of thing. Everyone's different. What's this culture that we're building, so on and so forth. But I do think it's important, and I think it's important to be driven by the leader. You're not going to be able to, as your organization grows. I'm sure you ran into this. I don't get to have a personal conversation with everybody on our team every day. But that fabric there that kind of ties us all together has to be there. Where do you typically see organizations kind of struggling with this? Like, what are the things, like if you went in to, help coach a client and that based on the answers, like, hey, there's some like cultural things that we've got to affect. Where do you typically see those like sprouting up?
I tell you where I start. Well, you see it when there's frustration, when there's lack of retention. So you're seeing a lot of these symptoms and you're seeing the leader going, gosh, I think I'm clear, but they just don't behave in the way in the way I expect them to. And they're just not delivering to the level I want them to. So I often start by looking at values and really sitting with the founder. I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and really ensuring they're getting clarity on what is important about their culture? What are the values they want to stand for? They want their business to stand for, because often they've done an exercise and it's sitting on a piece of paper on a shelf, but they've never brought it to life. They've never really gone into. So this value of trust, what does that look like when you're sitting in the customer service, when you're sitting in sales? How would a client know if you're embodying trust? So I come in to go, again, clarity. What are the values? Are we clear on them? And then I take them through, what does this mean for each and every department? Well, for each and every leader, and then for each and every department. Because unless you get that clarity and you help the team understand what that looks like, sounds like, and feels like, the culture is not gonna gel.
Yeah, we've seen this too. You can have a value of, one of our values is do what's right. Well, that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Like, do what's right when it's convenient, do what's right some of the time, whatever it may be. So I think that's such a great point of like, does everyone on your team, regardless of position, know what, or I guess more so like, what does it look like in their position? If I'm a technician, what does do what's right look like? If I'm in accounting, what does do what's right look like? So yeah, I think that's such a great point that you make there.
And Chad, I think another thing is you mentioned KPIs, which a lot of people use for reviews, but also one of the elements that I found can be really valuable is measure performance, but measure also those indicators, but measure how people are showing up in line with your values. Measure it so that you're showing it's important. Otherwise, it can seem like a nice to have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, if your values are just posted on the wall somewhere, they're a nice to have. They're really not helping guide the organization to hopefully do something better or, more outstanding than your competition, so on and so forth.
And Pat, just one more thing that's coming to me is you've mentioned self-awareness, and that is absolutely where leadership starts. So in this frame, what I would say is ensure that the leader ensures they are showing up in line with their values, because everyone has blind spots. And what we need to do is we need to understand ourselves and we need to understand our impact. Because inadvertently we might think we are doing the right thing, but maybe other people don't see it that way. And maybe it's a blind spot in the way you show up that is causing this disconnect. So that is a huge starting point.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I see leaders struggle with, and I am one of those people. So when I say leaders, I'm including myself. The great thing about doing these podcasts, I get asked selfish questions like, "Hey, I'm not good at this. Please help me." But one of the things I see leaders struggle with is having difficult conversations. Having those kind of rubber meets the road type of conversations. What's your advice for leaders on, not making it easier? They're tough conversations. They're not going to become easy conversations or be a different, different talk. Well, what are some like tips that leaders can use to maybe help them in having those conversations when the time comes?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard area for people, and there are quite a few things. I'm going to say again, get clarity on what is the feedback and the message that you want to convey. Get that crystal clear in your mind. Then the other point that I have found to be really game-changing, and I know really helped me, was be clear on your intention. Express your intention when you go into the meeting. Because often giving hard feedback can feel like, gosh, I'm having a go at them and what are they going to think and I'm the bad guy. But actually, when you go in and say, if this is the case, listen, I'm coming in to give some feedback. I understand that you've got a lot of potential. And the feedback I'm going to give you is what I believe is best for you and for us. So you're coming from a place of caring. You're coming from a place of them going, okay, they're not doing this to have a go at me. They're doing it with the best of intentions for me to grow. And that is probably one of the strongest pieces of advice I would give to leaders tackling difficult conversations.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think the other two things that I always think about are just like in life, difficult conversations become difficult the longer we wait to have them.
That's
Um, yeah, so yeah, I get it. We don't want to dive into it. It's like, here, I'll push that off till tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes and maybe the next day and the next day. And by then it's gotten so bad that, then the difficult conversation becomes a really, really scary one. And then I think the other piece of that is consistent feedback. A lot of our people, especially in the trades, have been conditioned to this saying, and they still tell me today, no feedback, no news is good news. As long as no one's yelling at me, I must be doing the right thing. And so it's like we've worked really hard over the past probably 12, 18 months to really, hey, it needs to be consistent. You need to be meeting with your people, say every other week, depending on how many people you have. You need to be meeting every other week to go over that, because then that difficult conversation is just wrapped up into continual feedback and continuing to get you better. And, maybe there's a lot of good things mixed in, and hey, we need to tackle this issue right here. But they're used to it.
Yeah.
When it's just a one-off thing, then it's like there's all this anxiety and like, well, why does my manager want to meet with me? What are they gonna, they're gonna talk to me. What am I doing wrong is their ultimate thing. And it's like, then the anxiety is so high in the room that nothing can get accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. Consistency is key, and also positioning that all feedback is positive for learning. And what we want to help you develop, because when you develop, you do a better job. That's good for you. That's good for us.
Yeah. One of the other things I've ran into, and I know other people, growing businesses, scaling business. Obviously, it seems like you and your brother grew something quite rapidly. Um, I think in leadership, we have to understand too that when scaling a business, is that all leaders, some of them may have a cap to what maybe it's skill. It may just be they don't really want to do that. Like they're pretty good doing what they're doing. How did you guys navigate like those different like jumps? I'm sure there were like revenue jumps where it's like, oh my God, we're running an entirely different business than we were 12 months ago, and we need people that think like this and are, different stuff like that. Like how did you navigate that?
Yeah, you really have to get to know your team, because there were definitely some people, just a couple of faces were coming into my mind as you saw. And you could see some that were very, very happy where they are, staying in their lane and keeping going, and that was just perfect. Whereas you could see some that were really hungry for growth, really hungry for feedback and curious. So I would say what we used to do is really look for the attitude. Who are the people who are curious, open-minded, and happy to learn, and willing to go that extra mile as well? That those are key criteria that we used, that I would definitely recommend to others.
Yeah. And would you say, I mean, this is something I found, like you've got to, like, some of the people that got you to a certain point may not get you to the next
Yeah.
point. How did you guys kind of handle that? Because that's a tough thing. I mean, when you're loyal and you've got people that have, helped you so much, and, how did you guys handle that when maybe a leader reached kind of their ceiling, yet the business needed something more?
It's all around communication, isn't it? It's communicating where we're going and what we're seeing in them, and getting feedback and making it a two-way dialogue, so that they also come to the realization. I remember we needed to exit someone, and actually we got them to see it was the best thing for them. They'd done wonderfully up until a certain point, but they were going to do a lot better elsewhere. And you say it with a lot of love, a lot of care, and listen, we've been thinking about it. What's coming up for you? What do you feel is important?
Yeah.
So often I'm a big one for showing that you care. And when people feel that you care and there's the trust, those conversations come a lot more easily.
Yeah. And I found too that, like, it often doesn't come as a surprise. Like most people can feel it. Like oh, this is, this thing is going in the direction I don't even know if I'm passionate about. It was cool leading six, leading 36 is a whole different ball game.
And sometimes it can be a relief to them
Yeah.
as well. It can be like, oh goodness, at least I don't have to have that difficult conversation. We're both, agreeing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I ran across when I was kind of researching before coming on here was your 6 indicators of leadership success. Tell me a little bit about those and that kind of paradigm that you guys have.
Yes. So I developed, and this was relatively recently, I was really looking at what are the indicators of success? Why do some very bright people do well and others not do so well? And I started to see that there were 6 elements that were real differentiators. Clarity, which you've heard me mention quite a few times already. Clarity, commitment, conviction, trust, courage, and then the last one is playfulness. And playfulness for me was the biggest surprise because I kept seeing that I was using, Chad, 2 words: let's play. And when I said them to founders who were in sessions with me, I'd see that their shoulders would relax, they'd take a deep breath, and their thinking would open up. And so playfulness has these 3 threads. It's a state of mind that it has the threads of intense curiosity, radical open-mindedness, and proactive experimentation. So what I do is I use these threads to really gain more clarity, deeper levels of conviction, really ensuring that we're getting commitment, that we're building trust, and that we're unlocking the courage that we need. So those
Yeah.
are my 6 indicators of success, and I've developed it into a scorecard that you might have seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about this playfulness piece because for me, like when you're smaller and you can be more agile, more nimble, you can experiment with ideas, you can go try different things, and you're not going to break the organization. As you get bigger and there's more process and procedure and more departments and more people you got to get on board, it to me it becomes less playful. It's like, oh, crap, I'd really like to roll out this idea, but I gotta, it's going to take us 6 months, and that seems terrible. What's your advice for, as the organization becomes longer, being able to hold that kind of indicator and being able to still lean into it as the organization I think there's more bureaucracy. There's more just, well, you can't do that because it's going to affect Bill's job over here and so on and so forth. Like, how do you kind of navigate that?
Well, I would say I would particularly lean into it as a playful state of mind of the leader. So with you, CEO, I would really lean into especially things like challenging assumptions. What assumptions do I hold to be true? And maybe I have been holding to be true that are leading to X results. But now we're going to why. What assumptions might be holding us back? So I would use it initially, not so much on an organizational level, but I would use it in your leadership to really become nimble, to become even more agile, because the world is changing. And so we need to embrace this mindset of intense curiosity, really. So that's where I would start. I would start at the level of you as the CEO and of your senior leadership team, and really getting you within your departments to think how you can unlock that potential, how you can make things even more effective and impactful by rethinking them.
Yeah. No, I think that rings very, very true to us. I think that, and you probably experience this too with rapid growth. It feels like you're always changing things. It's like, well, we did it this way yesterday. We got to change, and we got to do it this way, and we got to do it that way. And people are like, what are we doing? And so I think where we've kind of landed is like, we don't want to change just to change, but we want to find a problem. And then I think your point about assumptions is like, well, there's always we've been doing it this way for like 4 years. And it's like, well, yeah, but I think it could be a little bit better here. How do you kind of navigate like making a culture of change kind of having people embrace that, because I think ultimately with any change, it's like, oh, there's more work that I got to do. I got to rewrite the SOP and I got to do all of this stuff. Like, what's your advice for like making an organization that is just like hungry for change almost?
I think it's showing that the world is changing and that unless we adapt, we're going to stay still or indeed go backwards. So it's showing that it's an essential mindset, this playful high curiosity state. And unless we embrace it, we're going to die, or we're not going to develop at the speed that we need to. So I'm going to say it's part of the engine of growth. And it's showing that what we need to do is be playful, come up with these different ideas, but then really tune in and to decide which are the ones that are going to make the difference. Because we don't want to apply change just for the sake of it. We're looking at, well, those assumptions that we've been making for 4 years, they might have got us here, but are they going to get us there? And it's getting people to buy into the value of challenging and being curious.
Yeah. No, I think it's such a great point. I think one of the things we've also tried to do on our end is to prioritize changes.
Yeah.
As entrepreneurs, I've got a whole notebook full of ideas on what we can do, and this will be great and all of this. And it's really looking at a couple of things. One, high impact, high yield. Like, what can we go attack that may seem like a little bit bigger of a project, but if we just take that on and not all 10 things, we can get a very high yield out of that change. And so for me, it's almost like, kind of the, less is more, but let's pick those less projects that are going to yield, a greater result.
I think clarity on focus is crucial. You've got to, otherwise you can just work on so much that's not going to move the dial. Really hone into what's that one thing that's going to move the needle on the business and double down on that.
Yeah, makes so much sense. Well, Tracy, I really appreciate the time and appreciate the insights that you have regarding leadership and change management and kind of driving culture within an organization. I guess for listeners, if they want to get in touch with you or learn more about what you're doing, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is my go-to. I'm Tracy Clark Coach, Tracy Clark with no E's. So look me up there. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And if you're keen to take the Leadership Success Scorecard, that's also, we can put it in the notes of the podcast. If you'd like, they can get hooked a hold of me through that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy. Have a wonderful week, and I really appreciate the time and the insight.
Thank you so much, Chad. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.